Welcome to Shoot Straight Parenting Podcast, where we talk about how to aim high, shoot straight, and launch children for success.
I am Ted.
And I'm Jen. And today we are talking about walking your children through grief. This is a special unplanned episode that we decided to do because of some circumstances surrounding our children, and we felt like maybe talking through how to walk your children through grief would bring some help, some insight, and maybe some tools to our listeners.
We had a close friend of our children pass away tragically, and as Jen alluded to, it was obviously a surprise, and we learned some things through the process of having to walk them through a difficult time.
So we want to respect the family. We're not going to get into any details. This is still pretty raw, obviously. But this particular death has affected not just our children, but really our entire community, our church, our school, and multiple of our children were friends, one of whom was a very, very close friend. And so because we have multiple children who were affected, we were able to really gain some valuable insights into specifically how teenagers grieve, but thinking about children in general and how you can be prepared for this type of a situation, which is terrible, but could be very likely.
Yeah, and another thing we learned was they reacted different to how we reacted. So anyway, I'm getting ahead a little bit, but a quick disclaimer that we have no background in counseling, and there are obviously instances that need true grief counseling or other types of counselings that we absolutely would leave up to the professionals. This is just our experience and hopefully some tips that you won't have to use anytime soon, hopefully never. But again, just because of the timing of this and what we went through, we thought it would be a good idea to take one episode and walk through it.
Yeah, so we'll just kind of jump into some of the things that we observed. Then we'll talk through some of the tools that we used with our teenagers, and then we'll talk through how you can prepare younger children to walk through grief as well. One of the first things that we notice is that everyone grieves in their own way. In our situation, we had two children who just graduated from high school and then two children who are still in high school. All of these children knew this young man who passed away, and they individually handled it very, very differently. So we had one child who was just sobbing, as would be expected, two who just got very, very silent, one who kind of sobbed immediately and then got silent. And that's just kind of the immediate reaction. Obviously, how a child handles it in the first 5 minutes, the first hour, the first couple of days is going to look different as well.
Yeah, and one aspect of that, Jen, is managing each one through the initial reaction, but we also had to manage each other's perception of the others, right? So when one child would, for instance, just really not react to the initial news, the perception of the other two, who did react, right? And we had to, so there were just so many variables to this that I think it even surprised us.
It did. I was talking to my mother, who was a child. I believe she was 11 when her mother died. And my mother is very sensitive, very empathetic, gentle. And it kind of surprised me when she shared that when her mother died, she was emotionless. All of her brothers were sobbing and crying and not understanding. And she just got up and walked out of the room. And she says it was several weeks before she actually cried. And that was just the way that she needed to process. And it really surprised me, but it actually brought a little bit of maybe comfort or maybe freedom when she shared that at lunch with two of our daughters who were processing the loss of their friend, because those two girls had seen some friends who had just gone silent. They had just walked out of the room. And I think because our girls process things out loud, they had maybe been judging some of their friends who needed to just be silent, and recognizing that their grandmother had also processed things by going silent was actually eye-opening for them.
Yeah, yeah. I can remember when my grandfather died. He had cancer. He was sick for a long time. And my uncle came into my bedroom one morning and told me that he had passed away. And I didn't really react at all. And it was a few hours later when I really thought about it. I reminded myself of the fact that I would never see him again, and got emotional. And then fast forward to my freshman year in college, when I learned that a really good friend of mine that I was good friends with in middle school, I learned that he had committed suicide. But my reaction was similar. When I first heard it, I don't think I thought about it too much at the time. But then I remember driving back to college, and I got to my dorm room, and about an hour later, thought about it again. And I had the same thought. I thought to myself, wow, I'm never going to see that person again. Mm-hmm. And that's when I got emotional. But I struggled a little bit in that time because I was questioning whether I was a decent person or not, because I hadn't gotten emotional right away. And so I think I saw that in a few of the kids this time as well.
Yeah. Obviously, we are talking about maybe what could be considered the worst type of grieving, right? A death. There are other types of loss, and your children will grieve other types of loss. But specifically, if we're talking about death, it is just so important to remind them that they are going to process differently than their friends, and they need to allow themselves and they need to allow their friends to just grieve the way they need to. There is no wrong way to grieve, but there are things that will be more helpful to our children than other things that they do. And so our job is not to fix them. Our job is not to immediately solve this pain problem that they have. Our job is to help them find the helpful ways to grieve.
Yeah, for sure. So healing definitely doesn't happen in a straight line. They are going to feel different levels of grief at different times. And to the point that you just made, it's not going to be aligned with their friends. It's not going to be aligned with their siblings. And it's okay, because they have no control over that. It's going to be very much situational, and they just have to let themselves feel those feelings at whatever time it is.
Yeah, I call them waves of grief, right? So I just kept telling the kids, you're going to have waves. You're going to kind of forget about it for a minute, and it's going to come back in a wave. Or you're going to hear a song and it's going to remind you of him. So this friend used to come to our house and watch UFC fights a lot with the boys, and even with you, Ted. Yep. And so the next time that you guys sat down to watch a fight, I'm sure with our boys, there was a moment there of a little wave of grief, right? Yeah. And so waves of grief can happen. I lost my father, goodness, it'll be 17 years this coming winter. And I still get waves of grief. Now, the kind of little baby waves now, right? But there are still moments, and it tends to be that type of a thing where something just reminds me of him. And sometimes it just comes out of nowhere. And so we are preparing them for what is going to happen so that it normalizes it for them. And when they have that wave of grief, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Mom reminded me that this might happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important, and actually this is something that we talked through with the kids, to understand that there are different circles of people affected. There are those first level people. In this case, it would be parents, immediate family. We do have friends who have lost a spouse, or our children have had friends who have lost a parent. That's an immediate family. That level of grief is something that we really pray and hope that our children don't have to experience at all until they're older. But then there's that second level. These are the people that you're really intimate with, close friends. This could be your coworker. This is someone who was in your day-to-day life and into your day-to-day circle. This is pretty close. And one of our kids, well, probably the two seniors, were in that circle, certainly seeing them every day, and one as a close friend. That third level is where our other kids were. So definitely knew him, had a relationship with him, but not talking on a regular basis. And then I would say there's the kind of periphery people, right? Like if we hear on the news that a celebrity died, we're just on the periphery. You're affected when something happens in your hometown. You're affected when something happens to someone you know, but you're not really hurting. And I think it is important to just be aware of so we can share with our kids. Everyone grieves in their own way. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line, and that there are different circles. And it's okay to actually recognize, hey, my brother might be processing this differently because he is in a slightly different circle than I was. Or I don't have to try to force myself to feel an emotion that isn't there when I hear about someone's parent dying, because you weren't in that first circle with that parent. You probably weren't even in that second circle unless it was a really close friend's parent. So you can hurt for your friend, but you're not hurting for the person who passed, if that makes sense. I think it's just good to have that way to verbalize it so our children can understand what they are feeling, what it's going to look like, and that it is okay.
Yeah. And then, listen, it's okay to move on, right? And that's one thing that we ended up talking to them about probably within a couple of days.
Within a couple of hours, actually.
Maybe
I think.
hours, yeah. And moving on doesn't mean you move on forever, right? Sometimes you just move on in the moment. Within a couple of hours of hearing it, they shifted a little bit, and a couple of them got into a situation which we oftentimes have around here where someone tells a joke and everyone laughs. And we saw that at least one of them felt bad about it. Yeah. So we were quick to say, listen, these cycles of grief are not only day to day, week to week, month to month, but literally minute to minute within the first couple of days. And it's okay to laugh at a joke within a couple of hours of learning that someone dies, and you can come back to that grief. And listen, I always think to myself, what would I want people to do if I passed? Mm-hmm. I don't want people to sit around and sob for weeks. Get on with your life. Remember me, but get on with your life, and absolutely don't be afraid to laugh even within a short period of time, and don't feel guilty about it. You know, at the end of the day, humans are made to move on. We adapt oftentimes very quickly to whatever situation we're in, and new normals happen so quickly. And so in walking through that process, that was one of the most important things for them to understand, because with social media and with the extent to which they can communicate with other people, there's so many inputs to their hourly and daily life.
They were reminded constantly of his passing because of all of the communication, the different channels of communication.
Yeah, right. Thank you for bringing that up, because I don't know if we've hit on it yet. We had to make sure that they understood that because there are so many people putting so much information out, we recommended that they pause and not react to everything they see within a couple of minutes of seeing it, because in these situations, there's a lot of wrong information.
Exactly. And so it is important to just know that they will have these quick up and downs. It's okay to move on. They need to eat. They will laugh. Mentally prepare them for this is how you are going to feel. You will probably feel bad when you laugh. Don't. It's okay. You can go back to grieving. Allow yourself to laugh. You need to stop and eat. Those types of things. Obviously, we're really kind of talking around second and third level here. When you're in that first level, the moving on, the waves of grief, those things are going to be deeper, longer, wider, and move probably a little more slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, we're not trying to cover all bases here, right? Jen did a good job of going through those levels, but this level was a close friend, and the way that we guided them through it doesn't necessarily apply. I think that's the point you were trying to make, right? Exactly. It doesn't necessarily apply to every single situation of someone passing.
Sure. But what we've talked about are what it might look like for different people, but there are actually considered stages of grief. So the stages of grief are identified, they're real, but they don't always happen in the same order. They don't always hit everyone the same way, and not everybody experiences all of the levels of grief. So just quickly what those are. The first one is denial. It's going to sound like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Is this real? The second stage is anger. I think a lot of teenagers, this is something they might sit in for a bit. This is so unfair. Why is this happening? They might blame God. They might blame people around them. They might be looking for someone to blame because it's anger. It's a stage of grief. Most people are going to have to experience this. The third stage of grief is bargaining. This might look like someone saying, oh, if only I had, or why didn't I? This is where some of our children were sitting. Depression, this can be a what's the point? I think especially in that first level, when someone who you've built your life around passes, it can be very hard to move past what is the point without this person in my life. Acceptance is a stage of grief. It's going to be okay. I'm going to take a breath and move on. And then guilt is one that isn't always really recognized as a stage of grief, but it goes along with the bargaining. If there is unresolved conflict, this can be something where instead of sitting just in bargaining, they're sitting in bargaining/guilt. We even saw this within the friend group, that there had been some unresolved conflict and it just caused some pain with some children having to process through, I wish I wouldn't have said this, or I wish I had made the time to do this. And so it's just important for us as parents to recognize that we might see any of these, we might see all of these, we might see these very separately, and we might see these at the same time. But I think it's important to talk to our kids about each of these realities. So we're going to talk in a minute about what we can do in the moment, but let's just go back and recap some of the things that we need to be aware of in a situation where we're walking our children through grief. Everyone grieves in their own way. We need to let them. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. They're going to have waves of grief. There are different types of intimacy that we have with someone who passed away that can affect the way that we grieve. It's okay for them to move on. They will have moments where they forget. That's normal. That's expected. We want them to move on. And the different stages of grief are real, but they don't always happen in the same order, and they don't always hit everyone in the same way. So, what can we do in the moment? We know we are talking to our kids about what they can and should be experiencing. What are some tools that we can give them besides just telling them what to expect with their feelings? What are some other things that we can do in the moment?
Yeah, so first, I'm going to be honest here. This one was a little bit difficult for me as we went through this, but validate their feelings. Anything they're feeling, any emotions that they have for them are always valid.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that a little bit. I remember looking at the girls and going, come on, snap out of it. Get up. But they are the emotions that they had at the time. And thank you, because you kind of held me back a little bit and taught me a little bit through this. Let them.
They just needed it a few extra days more than the boys needed.
And even if their conclusions are wrong, we've gone through a couple of breakups with the kids, and they think that they'll never love again or never be loved again after
even though I tell them that dating in high school is just practicing breaking up.
But the underlying feeling, it's there. It's coming from their heart, right? It's there. It's real. Let them feel it. Just talk it out. And
one thing that really helped was just verbalizing out loud, you're all going to process this differently. What you're feeling right now is valid. We just validated their feelings. Whatever they were feeling in that minute, it was the truth. Their perception is their reality, right? Their feeling is valid. And so If they were angry, if they were upset, if they didn't understand, if they were in disbelief, if they were in shock, it was all valid and it was okay. And just being able to say that to them allowed them that freedom to feel the way they needed to. And let's avoid saying get over it, even though that might be what we're feeling, right? But just saying, I know, I understand, this sucks. Sometimes it's so important to just validate, this completely sucks. This is terrible. This feels bad. You're going to feel bad. It's important to avoid those trite phrases and use validating phrases instead. So I do think sometimes we can jump to kind of a trite phrase like, oh, they're in a better place, or all things always work out for good. And those are maybe true, but they're not typically helpful in a situation like this, especially in the first few hours or the first few days. Saying something that doesn't require a response. We want to give the freedom, especially let's say that you are texting someone because you want to reach out to them to let someone know that you're thinking of them. If you say, how are you doing? Now you're putting a demand on them to respond back to you when they just might not have the energy to. If you say, hey, I'm thinking of you, they don't need to respond. They're going to just know that you're thinking of them. And that's so much more considerate than expecting the other person to give you something back when they just might not be able to. So slightly different situation, but I think it's a great reminder. Let's just try to avoid phrases that really don't bring any value to the table. It's not going to help. Just go with, yeah, this sucks. I'm here. I got you.
Yeah. I think it's fine to say everything will be okay. I mean, even the question of what can I do for you? Don't put that on them at the time.
Yeah, just do something instead.
Or, I'm here.
Yeah.
So just preparing them for what the first few days or weeks will look like will really help them to just get a feel for, visualize in their mind what to expect. I think it eases some tension on their end. Jen and I both told a couple of stories of grief in our past. I think that really helped them as well, knowing that we had gone through it and that we weren't just being the parents who were trying to make every situation better for them, but we walked through similar situations at their ages.
Yeah, I definitely would also encourage them to talk about the friend that they have lost. Remember, write in the journal, do some memory dumping. It can be very cathartic, of course, but it's astonishing how quickly we forget things. And sometimes just doing that can bring a little bit of healing through the process, but also it's lovely to have something to be able to go back and look at. Also, in a situation like this, that's a gift to the parents to be able to have a memory that you can then go share at the appropriate time. I know the kids were able to attend a memorial service for their friend, and being able to share with his parents a few of the special memories that they had taken the time to write down was very, very special. So it's important for our children to understand that moving on does not mean forgetting. Actually, it can be really beautiful to just walk through remembering. It was super healing when their other friends came to our house and they sat around the campfire and told stories, their favorite moments with this friend. He had carved his initials in a log down by the campfire, happened to have done that just a few weeks prior. And so just that moment of remembering can be part of the healing process.
Yeah, for sure. All right, my turn to be a little pragmatic for a minute. Give them things to do, right? You can affect their mental progress through this thing. So if you have a child who's a server, they might feel better if they can help with something, help arranging something, help baking something, or even just helping out with anything around the house. You can do this in such a way that they don't even notice what you're doing, but it just takes their mind off that thing for a little while and returns them to some sense of normalcy. If you can affect a few of those hours and just give them something to do to take their mind off it, then it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, this is actually great for any children. Give them something to do. But I think in particular, if you have a child who's an acts of service type of a person, if you're familiar with the love languages, this is going to really be helpful for them. So Ted talked earlier about how when he has dealt with grief in the moment, he just kind of escapes and then he will deal with it privately. I've seen that multiple times. His brain is going 100 miles a minute, but he needs to sit and he can't do anything else. I'm the opposite. I need to get up and go do things. So when I am processing grief, I immediately go into fixer mode. I'm going to start cleaning. I'm going to start thinking about the practical things. Who needs to be fed? What needs to be done? I will also then go process privately, and I will cry privately. But in the moment, I need to have something to do. And so there's a chance that you might have a child who's like that as well. If you see that and you feel like they really need something to do, give them something to do. It doesn't mean they're not going to process things as well, but it can just be a great out. It's the same thing as kids who need to jump on a trampoline in order to memorize the math tables, right? It's the same type. You're looking at me like, I promise.
I've never heard that that's a real thing.
Yeah,
I doubt
like
it.
there are some kids who need to be moving in order to learn certain types of patterns.
I think that's just how the kids convinced you to let them go outside and play.
No, it's a real thing. And then another practical thing that we can do is when we're sitting and talking with them, start to talk about the future and just give them a little hope. Just remind them that things will feel differently. If you can put a time frame on it, do it. You're not going to necessarily always be able to do that with grief, but just remind them that in a week or a month from now, things will feel differently. I know I've used this for smaller situations. For example, when someone didn't get a role in the play that they really wanted, or when there's been a breakup. I will look at that child and say, I promise you by Tuesday, can you trust me? By Tuesday next week, you are going to feel better. And in that moment, they always look at me and say, no, I won't. And then on Tuesday, I will go back and remind them, do you remember what I said? In that moment, we need to be the parent. We got to carry them when they can't. And so when they're really, really in that moment of just true despondency, just giving them like, hey, I promise you this is going to get better. And it's really that long-term eyes. It's that perspective. If you are a person of faith, being able to bring in faith, maybe not in that first moment saying, hey, he's in a better place, might not be the thing to do in the first 5 minutes, but a few days later, starting to talk about what the long-term outlook of things is, the perspective, maybe the spiritual aspect of this type of grief can be really, really an important part of helping our kids to understand just the drop in the bucket of life.
Yeah, for sure. And then one other thing I wanted to mention was, and this was very situational, but Jen and I really did our best to try to get as much accurate information as we could around the circumstances of the situation and share that with the kids before they encountered less than accurate information from social media or from their friends. This helped us to really control the environment and the message because we realized how detrimental misinformation could be for them. But in doing so, we also requested that they, again, I think I mentioned this, we requested that they not...
Pause.
Yes, thank you. That they pause, not react, and definitely not reshare information.
Yeah, I mean, kids are going to have questions. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Why did this have to happen? And if someone gets the flu and dies in the hospital, that's a relatively easy situation to explain, but not all situations are. And so I think it is really important when anything is murky or sensitive or a tender subject to, like Ted said, make sure that we as parents have the information that we can in order to help walk our children through that. And man, what a great lesson for us to be able to actually, with the older children, say, can you guys see how this was hurtful, that people were sharing things online before they had the full truth? And we were able to even just really talk through what gossip looks like and how painful it can be and how they can't always stop the gossip train. they can just choose to stop it. So hopefully those gave you some ideas about what you as a parent can be mentally prepared for and what we can do in the moment to help our children validate their feelings, let them grieve how they need to, tell them what to expect, encourage them to talk, give them some action items and some hope, and just remind them that things will feel different and that life will move on. A lot of what we have talked about has been focused on teenagers because obviously that's the world that we live in right now. But I did want to bring some insight to helping younger children with grief. We did not, thankfully, have to walk through any deaths with any of our children when they were younger. We have had to walk through trauma with our children, specifically related to my domestic violence situation and kind of escaping that. So we've had some experience with walking younger children through trauma. I think grief is a little different. And so we do want to just talk about what that might look like with younger children. It's important to understand that permanence is not really a concept in super young children. Permanence is just this idea of forever. Mommy will never be back in my home again. This is what my mother probably struggled with as a 10 or 11-year-old in those first few weeks, really understanding that she was never going to see her again. Most experts say that permanence develops around age 8 to 12, and prior to that, they just don't understand it. So you can tell a child who's younger than that someone has died, but they just think it's temporary or reversible, and they just cannot grasp the concept of forever. So it's important to understand that. One thing that we should probably be aware of with younger children is we want to avoid euphemisms. Euphemisms can just cause confusion or fear or really even delay that understanding or the processing of grief. So you might feel like it's helpful to say, oh, well, she went to sleep or she went to a better place. But if that doesn't come with any other context, it's just going to cause confusion or fear. So you need to be direct. You can be direct and clear, but still be reassuring and supportive. Saying something like, her body stopped working and she isn't coming back. It's okay to feel sad. It's direct, but it's still supportive. It's still reassuring. This actually reminds me of when I was walking my children through trauma. It was very important not to just say who they knew as daddy at the time. If I just said, daddy is bad or daddy is gone, that would have been super confusing to them. If I just said daddy is not here, that would have been confusing and maybe even caused anger with them. So what I would say is, daddy is not safe right now. When the police officers and the doctors say that he is safe, then you can see him again. So that was a way to be direct and clear, but it was still reassuring to them. It was supportive to them, and it really helped them put it in a context that they could understand.
Yeah, I was going to say context matters, even with little kids. The next one is just maintain routines. So we've talked in previous episodes about our non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. Those remained non-negotiable. There's so much changing during this period of grief, and it's important to provide stability where you can. So we still had dinner, and they came to dinner. Even if they were a little bit down in the dumps, that routine was so important for them, probably more important at that time than it is otherwise. They don't know it. It's hard for them to understand. They might not want to be there, but they sat down, they started eating dinner, and then we started talking about something else.
And they needed it more than they realized.
Exactly. Yep. And then finally, just continue to create an environment where they can remember and focus on the positive memories and think about the good aspects of, in this case, their friend or whoever it was.
Yeah, and in particular, we're talking about for younger children right now. It could be very easy to just stop talking about that person, maybe almost memorialize them to the point where we just have a room that gets closed off and nobody's allowed to go in and talk about it. But the talking through process and focusing on the positive memories is actually super helpful. This is kind of silly, but I'm thinking about that song from Beetlejuice, and the girl is singing a song to her dead mom, and I love the song. But she's basically talking to her dead mom saying, Daddy doesn't want to acknowledge that you died. He doesn't want to even talk about you. And the very last line is, what is it going to take for him to say your name? And it's this girl going, I just want to remember my mom. I want to talk about her to my dad. And he's moving on. He's in denial. He wants me to heal. He wants me to move on. And she just wants to talk about her mom. And so we want to make sure that our little kids, our teenagers, have a place where they can remember and focus on those positive memories.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a lot about the situation and about how we managed through the situation with our kids, but let's talk for a few minutes about helping children with grief before it happens and really preparing.
Yeah, we obviously don't want to be doomsayers and assume that all of our children are going to lose someone close to them. But we can do small things from the time they're little in order to just prepare them for the realities of life, whatever that loss might look like.
Yep. And the first one is don't shelter your children from small losses, right?
Yeah. So
whether
important.
it's pets, the goldfish, right? The hamster, it helps them build resilience and helps them to understand, even as small as it may be, what loss feels like. And so when we flush a goldfish down the toilet and go to the store and get another one and put it in the tank and pretend like nothing happened, we're really doing them a little bit of a disservice, even when they're young.
Yeah, if you think about it, if you can expose your child to a small loss, small losses over time, they are beginning to understand what that circle of life looks like. How else are they going to understand what permanence is? How else are they going to begin to understand that this is what happens? Things grow and things die and things decay and things change, and life is full of unexpected losses and unexpected changes. And really, this goes towards any type of loss. If we protect our children from everything, they're going to struggle with an unexpected job loss in a way that maybe someone who's a little bit more resilient wouldn't have. And certainly breakups and things like that. So I think exposing them to small losses is actually really important. I think also just those natural opportunities to discuss death in particular, sadness, yes, grief, but all of those, just the things that we maybe want to avoid as parents because they're not fun to talk about, we have those natural opportunities around us. You could be taking a walk and you find a dead bird. That's an opportunity to discuss with your child. How do you think this bird might have died? And oh, this is sad. And I'm sure he had a beautiful song. And let's move his body off the trail so nobody steps on him. And it just begins to allow that to become normal. If you're watching a movie and there's a sad moment, don't just necessarily skip through that. When Simba's father dies, maybe when they're super little, but at some point you need to talk that through with your kids. There's a storyline or a book, or certainly like Ted alluded to, when a pet dies, that is a great opportunity to begin to discuss what is death? What does that look like? When would it be expected? Your children are going to have questions. Wouldn't you much rather discuss those answers about Simba and his father dying than you would in real life when it happens? So take those natural opportunities to begin to help the children process grief and sadness and death.
Yeah. But that all having been said, I think we still have a junior in high school who covers his eyes when someone might die in a movie.
But he also covers his eyes when there's inappropriate things on too. So I appreciate that.
True.
It is important to model healthy coping. We are going to show them how to cope with small losses, disappointments, and sadness in everyday life. If you sweep everything under the rug and everything is always wonderful and you have a Pollyanna attitude about everything, even when there's some sadness, and you are not showing them how to properly process your sadness or your disappointment, your kids are going to be less likely to have those tools and the skills that they need to deal with loss. when it happens to them.
Yeah, that's good. So in closing, one final thought that I had was that we noticed each of the kids learned something through this process.
Absolutely.
And we shared with them that that's okay and not to be guilty about the fact that they felt as though they improved in some way.
Richard, yeah.
Right? Life is a roller coaster, and the extent to which that they can learn from every situation, good or bad, will make them a better person.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Shoot Straight Parenting Podcast, and we will see you back next time.
Bye-bye.